This is the FM Gold channel of All India Radio. In the program News Analysis, we now bring you a discussion on revising current account deficit. The participants are Professor Aman Agarwal, Indian Institute of Finance, and S. Rangabasham, Economic Analyst.
The Finance Minister, Mr. P. Chidambaram, yesterday estimated that the current account deficit could come down to, $60 billion. Earlier it was estimated at, $70 billion. That was one major, part which was worrying the government apart from inflation. And also the Reserve Bank of India was concerned about the current account deficit. Do you think this estimate of $60 billion, bringing it down from $70 billion is a realistic kind of an estimate?
You see, there has been two things which have happened worldwide. Firstly, the US has seen a major turn down in the last 1 month. As a result, the dollar has seen a heavy depreciation. And in lieu of that, apart from the bailout package given by the US, the rupee has appreciated substantially in the last couple of weeks. And as a result, which has brought some kind of a realistic picture, but still rupee is fairly undervalued. This has actually led to the import bills actually going down, and that is in turn helping the current account deficit improve its position. The exports are still on a stagnant phase. There are not much exports because the current account deficit talks about basically the import, exports and other components which are there related to the trade aspect. Now there again, the exports have not gone up much because the international markets, whether it's Europe or US or other developed world countries, have not been doing well, and they are restricting their own trades to have come in terms of imports, to have their own reserves been taken care of. So exports has not gone up much, but the import which has come down has helped ease the current account deficit position. I feel that if the situation remains to be the same for the next quarter, which is expected that the US will still bail out and the rupee will steadily increase as it has been appreciating, we may even see the current account deficit go down to $50 billion in a month's time or so, which will help ease the pressure which both the Finance Minister and the Reserve Bank of India is faced with. And it is not much of doing from within the country, but more from an external pressure which has helped the current account deficit come down as it was built up in the last 3-4 months, which gone up substantially because of the rupee depreciation as well.
In fact, for this half year, from April to September 2013, exports have gone up by more than 14%. And in the past, 2.5 years, we had seen, exports doing very badly month after month. Now, do you think exports are kind of really picking up now?
No, I would say again, it is not too much of an export pickup which has taken place. If you really look at it, this 14% seems to be encouraging. But if you look at a year-on-year basis, there is not much improvement which we see on year-to-year basis. As I said, given the international market scenario, it has not gone up per se. So, and the fact that the exports have gone out to some extent has also been due to the rupee depreciation in the last 3-4 months, because the orders take time to be finalized. And then only when they are exported to the party overseas are they booked in the accounts of the exporter, as well as it comes in terms of revenue gain which the Government of India gets on the exports. So these are the orders which have been placed last month because of the rupee which had fell down substantially, which made exports cheaper in certain markets. And so it's not something which we should be too much excited about per se.
But do you think our exporters should kind of really look towards non-dollar denominated markets and expand their base, and rather than focusing on Europe and America?
No, I'm very happy that you asked this question, because in the last 10-15 years, to some extent, have actually diversified their portfolio for exports or overseas businesses which is coming to them, whether it is IT firms or softwares, or it is even in case of soft skills, BPO firms and others, which are services industries. They've actually diversified. But still, we see that most of the exports still is dominated by Europe or the US. And even when we are supplying to Europe, we are actually denominating that in US dollar term, because most acceptable currency so far in terms of pricing most of the Indian products internationally has been the US dollar. And I think that is a very important component that you outlined, wherein I think these exporters, small and medium-sized exporters, should also look at other markets apart from the US, given the fact that the US has actually gone down to the verge of bankruptcy. We had one of the CFOs from District of Columbia, Dr. Natwa Gandhi, with us last month, and he said that almost about 7 to 8 states in the United States have declared bankruptcy, and public officers for the period of 8 to 10 months have not been paid their salaries as well in those states. Now, given that scenario, how do we expect these exporters to get their money from private firms where the performance is still fairly low in the US given the debacle of the last 4-5 years? For exporters to diversify into other currencies which are denominated and which are having good business with India as of today.
Professor Agarwal, we are talking about exports. Let's also talk about some of the other aspects. In India, the APEX organization, the Federation of Indian Exporters Organization, they have been talking on and off about non-tariff barriers as well as a major hurdle in increasing exports for one reason or the other, whether, it's on the plea of child labor or containing, certain chemicals or whatever. All these non-tariff barriers are also there. Don't you think the government should look at these as well to kind of increase exports to all the countries where we are already exporting, but for these non-tariff barriers?
No, I think you're right, but given the framework which WTO had created, the Indian government and the cabinet is already progressing towards it, despite the fact that the WTO is no longer in functionality in real sense, but the framework which they suggested and began with, whether it is duties, whether it is other tariffs or taxes, whether it is adopting to international norms, the Indian government is committed. I think they're trying to put in efforts, but it takes time in a society which is run by small, unskilled laborers which are not in the framework of the government directly. They do not come to know who is doing what is being produced. A parallel economy which is as strong as a normal economy. It is very difficult for the government to actually bring in that framework and get it in function, which the international community is demanding for. But they are making efforts to, bring in systems. The direct cash mechanism would help them, although not only disperse, but also help them bring those people who have been out of the banking framework into the banking framework. To avail this facility, they will move into this framework, and then they will be able to keep a track on what should be done and what should not be done to benefit. And I think this will help bring in those structures which you are mentioning.
Yeah. We are talking about revision of the current account deficit to $60 billion. Let's also talk about imports. Earlier finger was pointed towards gold as being the main culprit. But apart from gold, don't you think others are also contributed, or if not now, at least in the previous months, they had contributed to the current account deficit, like capital goods import and also petroleum?
Yes, oil has been a major commodity. Apart from gold, agro-based products have also been a major commodity which have been a cause of concern in terms of the imports which have been taking place. Despite the fact that we have substantial food grains lying with us in the stockyards, there have been policies under which the government has given benefits both for fertilizers and agro-based products to be imported, and as a result, large amount of imports have been taking place on those accounts, not looking at what we have in our buffer itself. And I think that is where the government needs to bring about a check as well. Oil has certainly been a major commodity, but the most comfortable way to ease off the impact of oil imports is to allow the currency to appreciate. If it appreciates, automatically your import bills come down. In my opinion, the imposition on gold was wrong, whereas as it comes to banks, yes, to some extent, banks should be regulated in terms of the total amount of import they do and distribute. They had become a major vendor. Apart from banking activity, they were only doing gold selling activity, and there was a huge amount of gold sale on both corporate, individuals, coins and all, which was taking place through banking framework. I think that stoppage for a short period was good, and I think that needs to be relaxed over the period.
But other restrictions you feel
I feel is wrong,
Okay.
because what happens is gold is a commodity which is consumed by the masses and not the riches or the corporations or the central bank in this country. And the masses keep consuming that commodity which has been there. If you bring restrictions, they will go for the informal markets, and that is what we saw the day the impositions were raised. Immediately the informal market actually picked up, and there was a huge amount of smuggled gold which was selling into the market at almost 1.5 times. Now, if you're looking at those prices being created, artificial markets being created, on one side the government is wanting to rub them off the framework, and on the other side, if they bring in these kind of restrictions, and it has been observed time and again in the last 60 years that whenever they have tried to impose restrictions on commodities which are consumed by the markets, the markets specifically, like the grains, the food grains, or any kind of a mass production consumption item, it automatically moves to the informal segment because they cannot reduce consumption. Someone has to get children married, someone is going for a festival season like Deepavali or Dhanteras or others, they will have to consume irrespective of whether it is available in the market or not, and they will buy at whatever rate available. So given those requirements, one should not forget, because India does not have a formal social security system like some of the developed nations like US or UK or others, fall back on gold historically and creating children. Also, these two are the main aspects where they have more children, more social security confidence which they have. More gold becomes a buffer in terms of taking care of recession or any kind of ills which may come tomorrow, health problems or others which may come tomorrow to the masses. So these two aspects cannot be curtailed just by a policy framework.
But you spoke about the policy, but we have seen the impact of the policy ever since the imposition of all these restrictions. Gold imports have come down dramatically and had a telling impact on current account deficit.
It is artificial. It is a small steady means. It is like a person who is going through diabetes and you stop his sugar for the time being, so his sugar may come down, but as soon as you leave him to the open market again and you allow him to be free, you will see the diabetes number going up. So I think we need to be careful about which policy framework. Yes, as far as I said, restricting the banks for a time zone, let us say 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, or restricting how much can they import and sell. That is a good measure for the time being, but then it needs to be eased off. When we talk of free markets, we need to live in free market world, keeping the democratic framework and not by imposing and constraining and squeezing the investment pools which people have at large.
Would you say that gold ETFs, the exchange traded funds, have also contributed for the demand for the yellow metal?
Yes, the ETFs have artificially raised prices because of certain people who have been large traders who have influenced, and we are seeing some of the MCX problems coming up in the last 1 month where the MDs and others have been questioned on some of these issues. And that is one of the big issues, not only in gold, but even in sugar. We saw about 6 months back where the exchange traded were being questioned. Now this happens when there is a consolidation of an exchange, and we have seen in the US, the SEC have from time to time in the US, like the SEBI in India, has actually restricted certain trade commodities on these exchanges whenever they found there was an irregularity or too much of a trade which is taking place, not to cause destabilizing effect on the economy. So the government of India, the Reserve Bank, can actually come out and tell some of these exchanges to not trade on currency or not trade on gold or not trade on certain other commodities which are need-based commodities in this country for a short period of time, so that any kind of destabilizing effect which could be there to the government or to the country at large should not be there, and then can be restored at a later date. And not only US but various other developed markets and securities regulators have actually done this from time to time in the last 100 years to bring in discipline in the market.
Professor Agarwal, discussing about gold being the main culprit contributing to current account deficit, but some of the analysts have also pointed towards capital goods import, that silently it has also contributed, but somehow it hasn't come into the limelight. Would you agree with this?
Yes, the capital goods have largely not come into the limelight because it's a question of consumer confidence being raised and also sending a message to the international market. If there is too much debate on that, then you are not going to see a lot of FDI, which we are expecting to come into retail, defense and other sectors, which have recently been opened up in the last 1 year by the Cabinet Committee for Investment, which would actually deter them away when we impose or bring about capital goods into picture. And also the consumers have benefited because of a huge amount of competition which has come into the market because of these goods, and reduced the prices, which have eased the pressure on the masses in terms of the inflation built up pressure which was there. So in my opinion, that's one of the reasons why not too much debate is heard about the capital goods.
Professor Agarwal, on that optimistic note, let's wind up this discussion. Let's hope that the current account deficit comes down still further within the comfort zone of the Reserve Bank and the government. Thank you so much for joining us in the studios.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on revising current account deficit. The participants were Professor Aman Agarwal, Indian Institute of Finance, and S. Rangabasham, Economic Analyst. It came to you in the program News Analysis, produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website, newsonair.nic.in. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.